She woke up every morning to the soft hum of the city outside her window. The sounds were familiar and comforting, like old friends who never left her side. Even though she could not see, she had learned to navigate the world in ways others often took for granted. The brush of her fingertips along the walls, the careful tapping of her cane, the scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen, all became guides for her day. She had grown used to a life built on careful routines and quiet patience. Her husband, though not unkind, often seemed impatient with her limitations. He would offer instructions in a tone that made her feel more like a child than an equal partner. She learned not to protest too loudly. It was easier to move through her day with calmness rather than confrontation. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, determined not to let her blindness define her worth. In her earlier years, music had been her escape and her joy. She could remember hours spent at the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys as melodies flowed effortlessly from her mind to her hands. That world of sound was pure magic to her, a private universe where she felt completely herself. But after her accident, the piano sat untouched in a corner of the room, gathering dust. Her husband had never taken much interest in her talent, and over time, the spark of music in her life had been dimmed by the demands of everyday survival. She moved through her morning routine with the practiced ease of someone who had mastered her environment. She made tea, arranged the small vase of flowers on the table, and checked that the few essential items she needed were within reach. Each movement was deliberate and precise, honed over years of navigating a world not built for her. Despite the limitations, she had created a space that was safe and orderly. The day began quietly, as it often did with the subtle routines of life. She could hear the distant chatter of neighbors, the occasional bark of a dog, the hum of cars passing by. Each sound painted a picture in her mind, allowing her to feel connected to a world she could not see. She listened with intention, letting the rhythms of life guide her through the morning. Her husband returned home later in the day. He had been at work, busy with matters that seemed more important than the small details of their shared life. When he entered, he often carried an air of distraction, barely noticing the careful arrangements she had made in the house. She greeted him quietly, hoping for a few words of genuine connection, though they were rare. He spoke of his day in a clipped manner, unaware of the weight his words sometimes carried. She listened attentively, offering gentle responses, but always keeping her own feelings tucked away. She had learned that survival often meant patience and careful observation. Her world was quiet, controlled, and small, but it was her own. There were moments when she longed for the past, for the freedom she once had to express herself through music. She could still hear the notes in her mind, the way her fingers once danced across the keys with effortless grace. But those moments were fleeting, replaced by the steady rhythm of daily life and the cautious navigation of her limited world. She spent hours each day in quiet reflection, thinking about what life had become. Her blindness had changed everything, but it had not extinguished her inner light. She still dreamed, still hoped, and still longed for the kind of recognition and respect that had always eluded her. She had grown accustomed to living in the shadows of others' expectations, but she carried a secret strength within her. Despite the lack of encouragement, she never stopped believing in her own abilities. She remembered the applause she had once received, the joy of sharing her music with those who truly listened. Those memories were her private treasures, reminders that her talents were real and meaningful. Even if they were not acknowledged by the people around her, her relationship with her husband was complex. There was affection, certainly, but it was often overshadowed by misunderstanding and impatience. He saw her blindness as a limitation, something to manage rather than embrace. She learned to navigate his moods and expectations with quiet skill, choosing battles wisely and conserving her energy for the moments that truly mattered. The house they shared was filled with subtle signs of her presence. The careful placement of objects, the neatness of the rooms, the gentle scent of flowers and spices, these were all expressions of her careful attention and care. She moved through the space with confidence, knowing every corner, every texture, every sound. Her blindness had taught her to listen deeply, to feel the world in ways others often overlooked. She found solace in small routines, The act of cooking, of arranging flowers, of folding laundry with precision became acts of quiet mastery. Each task was a reminder that she could still create order and beauty, even in a world that often seemed indifferent. She took pride in these small accomplishments, knowing they reflected her inner strength and resilience. There were days when she felt the weight of isolation more heavily. The inability to see the expressions of others, to participate fully in visual experiences, created a subtle loneliness that lingered beneath the surface. Yet she never allowed this feeling to dominate her life. She found ways to connect through conversation, through touch, and through the memories of her musical past. The thought of performing again sometimes crossed her mind. She imagined sitting at the piano, letting her fingers move freely over the keys, filling the room with the melodies that had once defined her life. It was a dream she held close, a secret longing that she rarely shared. The idea of performing in front of others, especially those who had dismissed her talent, filled her with both fear and anticipation. Her life was a delicate balance between independence. She relied on her husband for certain things, but she also cultivated a strong sense of self-reliance. Each day was a negotiation, careful dance between the limitations imposed by her blindness and the desire to live fully and meaningfully. She moved through the world with quiet determination, guided by her inner compass. Even in the quiet moments, she remained vigilant. She listened for the nuances in her husband's tone, for the subtle shifts in the household, for the signs of change that might affect her. She had learned to trust her instincts, to read the world in ways that were not dependent on sight. Her senses became finely tuned instruments, allowing her to navigate the complexities of daily life with grace. She cherished the moments of solitude, when she could retreat into her own thoughts and memories. These were the times when she felt most connected to herself. When the weight of external expectations lifted, and she could simply exist in her own space, it was in these moments that she remembered the music, the joy, and the freedom she had once known. Despite the challenges, she approached each day with quiet courage. She faced the world with determination, even when others failed to see her strength. Her blindness had taught her patience, resilience, and empathy, qualities that often went unnoticed but were deeply ingrained in her character. She moved through life with a sense of purpose, guided by the knowledge that her worth was not defined by the limitations others imposed upon her. As the day drew to a close, she prepared for the evening with the same careful attention she had given to the morning. She arranged the room, checked that everything was in its place, and took a moment to breathe deeply. The world outside continued its steady rhythm, but within her home, she created a space of calm and order. She thought about the life she had built, the routines she had mastered, and the small victories she had achieved. Each day was a testament to her resilience, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, she could create meaning and beauty. She held on to the hope that one day, her talents would be recognized, and her voice, her music, and her strength would be seen and celebrated by those who truly mattered. The night settled in, and she prepared for sleep with a sense of quiet reflection. She listened to the familiar sounds of the city, feeling the comfort of routine and the reassurance of stability. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she faced them with the same quiet determination that had carried her through the years. In her heart, she held the knowledge that her life, though different from what she had once imagined, was filled with strength, resilience, and the unbroken spark of her own potential. The day began like any other, but she felt an unease she could not ignore. There was a tension in the air, subtle yet noticeable, like the quiet before a storm. Her husband had been unusually hurried in the morning, speaking sharply to her about small tasks and making sudden demands that made her heart race. Something in his tone hinted at an event or gathering she had not yet been told about. She tried to ask, but he brushed her questions aside with impatient words, leaving her more anxious than before. By mid-morning, the house began to fill with noises that made her pulse quicken. Voices of people she did not know mingled with familiar tones. The clinking of glasses, laughter, and footsteps, creating a confusing tapestry of sound. She could tell a gathering was underway, though she had not been prepared for it. Her husband's footsteps grew louder and more insistent. She sensed that she was being watched even though she could not see. He spoke to her suddenly, his words sharp and commanding. He wanted her to perform, to provide entertainment for the guests. The request was not gentle. It was more like an order than an invitation. Her heart sank, and her mind raced. Performing in front of strangers had never been her choice. She had played music for herself, for quiet moments of solitude, but never for the judgment of others. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and unsure of how to respond. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out for support, her fingers brushing the furniture around her to steady herself. She tried to explain, her voice soft and hesitant, that she was not prepared, that she needed time. But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The insistence in her husband's tone left little room for discussion. She realized she had a choice: resist and risk confrontation, or comply and face a performance she was unready for. The guests were beginning to gather around, their voices growing louder and more expectant. She could hear whispers, soft chuckles, and the low hum of curiosity. Some of the voices sounded sympathetic, while others carried amusement, as if they were anticipating a spectacle. The thought of humiliation made her stomach twist, but a quiet resolve began to build within her. She would find a way to navigate this moment with dignity. She took a deep breath, focusing on the sounds around her. She allowed herself to recall the familiar feeling of music beneath her fingers, the memories of keys, notes, and rhythms that had once been her sanctuary. Even though she could not see, she trusted her memory, her training, and the years of experience she had cultivated in silence. Slowly, she moved toward the piano, guided by sound and touch. Her husband followed, murmuring instructions and reminders, as if rehearsing a scene he had planned. She ignored the harshness in his words and concentrated on finding her own center. She felt the keys beneath her fingertips, cold and smooth, and let her fingers settle into their familiar positions. The room seemed to hush, the chaotic energy of the gathering momentarily suspended by her presence. For a moment, she allowed herself to pause, to breathe, to let the anticipation settle. She could sense the eyes upon her, though she could not see them, and the weight of expectation pressed heavily on her shoulders. Fear and anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed them aside, reminding herself of her inner strength. This was not just about music. It was about claiming her own voice in a world that often ignored her as she began to play. The first notes were tentative, almost fragile. She listened closely to the sounds, adjusting her movements with care. Slowly, confidence began to return, flowing through her fingers and into the room. The music unfolded, delicate and precise, carrying with it the depth of her emotions and the years of suppressed talent that had lain dormant. Each note was a statement of presence, a declaration that she could not be underestimated or overlooked. The atmosphere in the room shifted as her performance continued. Conversation ceased, and the hum of activity faded into silence. Guests leaned forward, listening intently, their amusement replaced by awe. Her music spoke in ways words could not, bridging the gap between her world and theirs. The vulnerability she had felt moments before transformed into power, and the room was captivated by the sheer authenticity of her expression. Her husband, standing nearby, was forced to confront the reality he had ignored for so long. He watched, stunned, as the woman he had underestimated revealed a talent that could not be contained or dismissed. There was a subtle shift in his demeanor, a mixture of surprise, admiration, and perhaps shame. For the first time, he truly saw her not as a burden, but as a person of depth, skill, and resilience. The guests responded instinctively, some with whispered praise, others with visible emotion. She could sense their reaction in the subtle movements of air, the quiet exhalations, and the sudden stillness. The room was transformed by her presence and her music, the boundaries of expectation shattered by her courage and talent. What had begun as a forced performance became a moment of revelation, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. She continued to play, letting the melodies flow naturally, guided by memory and instinct. Each note carried layers of emotion, fear, hope, sorrow, and joy, intertwined in a complex harmony. She was no longer performing for approval or acceptance. She was performing to honor her own abilities, to reclaim a sense of self that had long been suppressed. The music became an act of liberation, a way to assert her presence and her worth. Time seemed to stretch. The room suspended in the intensity of the performance. Guests remained silent, captivated by the authenticity and depth of what they were witnessing. Her own fear had transformed into a steady resolve, each chord reinforcing her confidence. She felt a profound connection to the space around her, to the people listening, and to the memories that had shaped her musical journey as the final notes resonated. The room held its breath for a moment, unwilling to break the spell. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. Tentative at first and then stronger, more genuine. The sound was overwhelming, yet deeply satisfying. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and exhilaration. For the first time in a long time, she had been seen and appreciated for who she truly was. Not defined by her blindness, but celebrated for her talent and courage. Her husband approached quietly. No words at first, only a look of astonishment and realization. He had underestimated her, assumed her limitations defined her entirely, and now he was confronted with the truth. His voice finally broke the silence, hesitant and soft, asking questions he had never asked before. Seeking to understand the depth of her talent and the years of potential he had overlooked, the guests lingered, unwilling to let the moment fade too quickly. They offered compliments, asked questions, and expressed their admiration. She listened, quietly absorbing the impact of her performance. Realizing that what had started as a moment of fear had become a turning point, she had turned humiliation into triumph, doubt into affirmation, and silence into recognition. In the quiet aftermath, she allowed herself a private moment to reflect. She had faced fear, complied under pressure, and emerged stronger. She had reminded herself, and everyone around her, that her value was not determined by limitations, but by resilience, skill, and the courage to step into the unknown. The experience would remain with her, a reminder that strength often reveals itself in the most unexpected ways. The day continued, but the energy had shifted. She moved through the house with a renewed sense of confidence, carrying the knowledge that she had not only survived a challenging moment, but had transformed it into something meaningful and powerful. The encounter left an indelible mark on everyone present, reshaping perceptions and creating a new understanding of her abilities and worth. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering just above the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. The room was silent, the hum of voices from before fading into a hushed anticipation. Every heartbeat seemed loud in her chest, echoing the nervous energy that surged through her. She reminded herself to breathe, to center her thoughts, and to trust the muscle memory and intuition that had guided her through music for so long. Slowly, she pressed her fingers to the keys. The first notes, delicate and uncertain, yet filled with raw emotion. The sound filled the room, resonating with the quiet desperation and courage she felt within. She could sense the presence of everyone around her, their expectations pressing upon her, but she allowed the music to take over. The melody became a language of its own, a way to express what words could not convey. Her mind drifted to memories of playing in the past, of hours spent perfecting each note, of the joy of creating music that could touch hearts. Though her sight was gone, the feeling of the keys, the rhythm, and the melody remained vivid in her mind. It was as if the piano itself recognized her touch, responding to her with a familiarity that was comforting and empowering. The audience leaned in, sensing the transformation unfolding before them. What began as a tentative performance grew stronger with each note. She allowed herself to immerse fully in the music, letting the emotions guide her hands and her expression. The room seemed to expand and contract with the ebb and flow of the melody, each note carrying a story of resilience, sorrow, hope, and triumph. As she played, she felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of liberation. She was no longer performing for approval, no longer seeking to please those who had doubted her. Instead, she was performing for herself, for the truth of her abilities, and for the expression of the life she had endured. Each chord struck a balance between vulnerability and strength, revealing the depth of her character. The reactions of the listeners were subtle at first. A sigh of surprise here, a quiet murmur there. Slowly, the whispers of disbelief turned into attentive silence, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. Her husband, who had once underestimated her, now stood frozen, caught between awe and regret. He had never imagined that she could command such presence, that her music could hold so much power. With every passing moment, her confidence grew. The music began to flow more freely, unrestrained by fear or hesitation. She moved through the piano with grace and certainty, each note a declaration of her inner strength. The guests were captivated, drawn into the world she was creating with sound alone. The performance became more than just entertainment. It was an emotional journey that touched the hearts of everyone in the room. She could feel the emotional tension building, the collective energy of the audience responding to her. Some were moved to tears, others to quiet admiration, and a few seemed lost in reflection. The room was no longer filled with judgment or expectation. It was filled with shared humanity, with the recognition of talent, courage, and the beauty of expression. She had transformed fear into art. The result was nothing short of miraculous. Her thoughts briefly returned to the years when music had been her sanctuary, the time when the piano had been her closest companion. Those memories fueled her performance, adding layers of emotion that only someone who had truly lived through struggle could convey. Every note carried not just skill, but the weight of experience, resilience, and the quiet dignity of a life lived with perseverance. She could feel her own body responding to the music, the rise and fall of her chest, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the rhythmic movement of her fingers. She was fully present, fully alive in a way that she had not felt for years. The music had become an extension of herself, a bridge between the world she inhabited and the audience, who now witnessed her truth. The audience was completely absorbed. Conversations had stopped entirely, the room enveloped in an almost sacred silence. Some held their hands to their chests, as if trying to physically contain the emotions stirred by the music. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, listening with rapt attention. The impact of her performance went beyond skill. It reached deep into the heart, evoking empathy, admiration, and profound respect. Her husband, unable to tear his eyes from her, felt a mixture of emotions he had never expected. Pride, guilt, awe, and love intertwined, creating a complex tapestry of realization. He had underestimated her for too long, assuming her blindness limited her, never imagining the depth and power she carried within. In that moment, he recognized the strength he had overlooked, the talent that had been quietly waiting to emerge. The music shifted, moving into a section that was both powerful and tender. It carried the weight of her struggles, the hidden joys and sorrows, the resilience that had sustained her through years of challenges. Each note was precise, deliberate, and infused with emotional truth. She was no longer performing merely to appease her husband or the audience. She was performing to claim her own identity and to assert her presence in the world. As the performance reached its climax, the energy in the room intensified. The audience could feel the culmination of years of suppressed potential, the release of pent-up emotions, and the undeniable proof of her capabilities. She was no longer invisible, no longer underestimated. She had captured attention, respect, and admiration through the universal language of music. The final notes hung in the air, lingering like a breath held in reverence. The silence that followed was profound, a testament to the impact of her performance. Then gradually, the room erupted, not with laughter or judgment, but with applause, cheers, and heartfelt praise. The sound was overwhelming, yet deeply satisfying, affirming that she had not only met expectations, but had far exceeded them. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration, the fear and tension of the past moments giving way to a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable and had transformed it into a triumph. The experience was both humbling and empowering, a reminder of her resilience and the power of perseverance. Her husband approached, his steps hesitant yet purposeful. He spoke softly, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and contrition. Acknowledging the depth of her talent and the years he had failed to appreciate it, the interaction was quiet but meaningful, a recognition of her worth and the change that had occurred within him. It was a turning point, a moment of reconciliation and understanding. The guests lingered, some approaching to express admiration directly, others sharing whispers of amazement. Each interaction reinforced the reality that she had made an indelible impression, that her performance had touched lives and reshaped perceptions. What had started as a forced, uncomfortable situation had evolved into an experience of mutual respect, emotional connection, and profound revelation. In the quiet moments after the applause, she allowed herself to reflect. She had discovered a new depth within herself, a realization of her own strength and the power of her voice. The experience reinforced the understanding that limitations do not define a person, but courage, talent, and authenticity do. She felt renewed, empowered, and ready to embrace the future with a sense of purpose and self-assurance. As she left the piano and returned to her place in the room, the atmosphere remained charged with the energy she had created. The transformation she had achieved was evident in the expressions of those around her. The shift in her husband's demeanor and the lingering sense of awe that permeated the space. She had not only performed music, she had performed a powerful affirmation of self-worth, resilience, and dignity. The rest of the evening unfolded with a sense of quiet reverence. Conversations were more genuine, interactions more thoughtful, and the energy of the gathering had shifted. Her presence was now fully recognized, her talent fully appreciated, and her courage fully respected. The experience had created a lasting impact, one that would not be forgotten by those who had witnessed it. She retreated to a quiet corner later, allowing herself a moment of introspection. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the struggles, fears, and moments of doubt that had shaped her life. She realized that the performance was more than a display of skill. It was a testament to the human spirit, a demonstration that strength, talent, and resilience could flourish even in the face of adversity. Her heart was full, her mind clear, and her spirit uplifted. She had faced an extraordinary challenge and emerged not only unscathed but stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own capabilities. The music had become a bridge, connecting her inner world with those around her, creating understanding, respect, and admiration. It was a moment she would carry with her always, a turning point that reshaped her sense of self and the way she was seen by the world. The room remained quiet for a few moments after her performance, as if everyone present was processing what they had just witnessed. The music had left a mark far deeper than any applause could convey. It was not merely skill or technique that impressed them. It was the honesty, the raw emotion, and the strength that emanated from her very being. She could sense the subtle shifts in energy around her, the realization dawning in their expressions and the way their bodies leaned in. Attentive, respectful, almost reverent. Her husband, who had stood nearby in stunned silence, now felt a pang of guilt that he could not ignore. He had underestimated her for so long, assuming her blindness limited not just her vision but her abilities, her potential, and her worth. The arrogance of that assumption pressed heavily upon him, making him acutely aware of how unfairly he had judged her. His eyes, unaccustomed to seeing her in this light, softened with regret and newfound admiration. The guests, too, were grappling with their emotions. Those who had expected a timid or awkward display were instead faced with brilliance, an undeniable talent that spoke of years of dedication, resilience, and inner strength. Some were moved to tears, overcome by the beauty and sincerity of the performance. Others exchanged whispers, acknowledging that they had been wrong to doubt her. The atmosphere was thick with amazement, humility, reflection. She felt the weight of the moment pressing gently against her, not as fear, but as recognition of what she had achieved. This was more than just music. It was a declaration, a statement that she was more than her blindness, more than the limitations others had placed upon her. It was a triumph of spirit, a reminder that value and talent could never be fully measured by appearances or assumptions. Her husband stepped closer, his voice hesitant at first. He spoke words that had never been said before, words of acknowledgement and apology. He admitted that he had never understood the depth of her talent, that he had taken for granted the quiet strength she carried every day. His tone carried both humility and awe, and she felt a mix of emotions: validation, relief, and a cautious hope that he could truly change the way he saw her. The guests, sensing the sincerity in the exchange, responded with nods, soft murmurs of agreement, and smiles. The room seemed to soften, the earlier tension and judgment replaced by an atmosphere of appreciation and respect. She realized that she had not only impressed them with her skill, but had also shifted their perception, challenging their preconceptions and forcing them to confront their biases. She took a moment to breathe, letting the significance of the event settle into her consciousness. She thought about the years of patience, the quiet resilience, and the moments of doubt and fear that had led her here. Each note she had played was a testament to her perseverance, each chord a reflection of her inner strength. The recognition she was receiving now was not just for a single performance, but for a lifetime of unspoken dedication. The guests began to engage with her more directly, asking questions about her music, expressing curiosity about how she had learned, and showing genuine interest in her experiences. She responded with calm confidence, sharing anecdotes and reflections that had once been kept private. The conversation flowed naturally, the dialogue grounded in mutual respect and a newfound understanding of her abilities. Her husband, still processing the impact of the performance, continued to express amazement and humility. He acknowledged his previous misconceptions and promised to be more supportive, more attentive, and more appreciative of her talents and contributions. The shift in his attitude was noticeable, subtle, yet profound, and it filled her with a sense of cautious optimism for the future. The energy in the room gradually transitioned from awe to celebration. Guests who had arrived with casual curiosity or even amusement were now genuinely engaged, expressing admiration and encouragement. The room was alive with a positive, affirming energy, one that recognized her not as someone to be judged or pitied, but as an individual of remarkable talent and character. She reflected on the unexpected journey of the day, from apprehension and fear to triumph and recognition. The experience had transformed not only her relationship with her husband, but also her relationship with herself and the world around her. She had faced a challenge imposed upon her, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own capabilities. It was a turning point, a moment that would forever change the way she saw herself and the way others saw her. Her thoughts wandered to the concept of respect and recognition. For so long, she had lived quietly, her talents hidden and unacknowledged. She realized that the performance had not only showcased her abilities, but it also created a new standard of understanding for those who witnessed it. Respect was no longer conditional on assumptions or pity. It was earned and deserved. It's visible in the reactions and emotions of those around her. She noticed subtle gestures of remorse and admiration from the guests. Some avoided eye contact at first, uncertain of how to address their previous judgments. But slowly, they approached her with sincere words of acknowledgement. Others shared stories of their own experiences, connecting with her vulnerability and strength in a way that transcended the boundaries of sight and circumstance. The room had become a space of authentic human connection. Forged through music and mutual recognition, her husband remained close, attentive to her reactions, and careful not to dominate the conversation. He listened to the praise she received, offering quiet support without overshadowing her accomplishments. The shift in his behavior was a testament to the profound impact of her performance, demonstrating that genuine talent and courage could reshape even long-held perceptions and attitudes. As the evening continued, she felt a sense of liberation she had not experienced in years. The recognition of her abilities was validating, but more importantly, it was empowering. She realized that her worth was not defined by limitations, circumstances, or the expectations of others. She was capable, resilient, and deserving of respect. And this truth had been made evident to everyone present. The atmosphere in the room remained charged with the energy of transformation. Guests engaged in meaningful conversations, sharing insights, reflections, and emotions stirred by the performance. The sense of awe and admiration lingered, creating a lasting impression that would not be forgotten. She could feel the ripple effect of her courage and talent, influencing not only her husband, but also the wider circle of individuals present in private moments. She reflected on the inner strength that had guided her through fear and uncertainty, the ability to perform under pressure, to transform apprehension into expression. It's a testament to her resilience and determination. She acknowledged the role of past experiences of music as both solace and discipline. In shaping her capacity to rise to the occasion, her husband's acknowledgement continued to deepen. He sought to understand more about her life, her music, and her perspective. Their conversation, once marked by impatience and misunderstanding, became collaborative and respectful. The shift was profound, signaling a new chapter in their relationship. Built on mutual appreciation and recognition, the guests gradually began to disperse. But the atmosphere remained enriched by the events of the evening. The memory of the performance, the emotional journey it had triggered, and the acknowledgement of her talent lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it. She felt a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, knowing that her courage had not only transformed her own experience, but it also reshaped the perceptions and attitudes of those around her. As the house quieted and the last guests departed, she allowed herself a moment of introspection. She reflected on the power of authenticity, resilience, and the ability to rise above imposed limitations. The experience had been a profound lesson, demonstrating that true recognition and respect are earned through courage, talent, and unwavering dedication. It was a moment that would continue to inspire her, reinforcing the value of perseverance and the strength of the human spirit. She knew that the journey was not over. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and times when patience and courage would be required again. Yet the events of the evening had provided undeniable proof of her abilities and her worth. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of her own potential, and a strengthened resolve to embrace the future with confidence and grace. The night ended quietly. The impact of the day remained vivid. She had turned a situation that began with fear and humiliation into a powerful affirmation of self-worth, skill, and resilience. The recognition she received was more than applause. It was a validation of her journey, her talents, and her unbroken spirit. She had transformed not only the perceptions of others, but also her own understanding of what she was capable of achieving. The morning after the performance began quietly, but it carried a sense of change in the air. She woke up with a feeling she had not experienced in years, a sense of lightness and empowerment that filled the room with a subtle energy. The night had brought recognition, respect, and a profound sense of accomplishment, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that her life had taken a new direction. Her husband, who had spent the previous day in awe and reflection, approached her with a gentleness and attentiveness that surprised her. He spoke softly, expressing a desire to support her more fully, to recognize her abilities, and to encourage her passions rather than dictate them. His words carried sincerity, and she could hear the depth of his realization in every sentence. She felt a cautious optimism, sensing that the dynamics of their relationship were beginning to shift. As she moved through the familiar routines of the morning, she noticed subtle differences in the way others interacted with her. The air around her was warmer, more considerate, and more aware of her presence. Guests from the previous evening had already begun sharing stories of her performance with friends and acquaintances, spreading word of her talent and resilience. She could sense the ripple effect, the way a single act of courage and authenticity had transformed perceptions far beyond the room in which it had occurred. The piano, once a dormant piece of furniture in the corner of the room, now seemed to call to her with renewed purpose. She approached it, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingertips, and allowed herself to play freely. The music flowed effortlessly, not for an audience, but for herself. As an expression of her newfound confidence and self-worth, each note resonated with a sense of liberation, a reminder that her abilities were real, valid, and deserving of recognition. Her mind wandered to the experiences of the past, to the years of quiet patience, hidden talent, and unspoken dreams. She realized that the performance had not only validated her skills, but it also validated her existence in a world that had often overlooked her. She felt a profound connection to her own strength, to the resilience that had carried her through challenges, and to the courage that had allowed her to transform fear into expression. The day progressed with interactions that reinforced the shift in her life. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues reached out to offer support, admiration, and encouragement. She found herself engaged in conversations that were once difficult or uncomfortable, now flowing naturally with mutual respect and understanding. The acknowledgement of her talent had created a space where she could interact confidently and authentically, without fear of judgment or dismissal. Her husband took an active role in supporting her newfound recognition. He accompanied her to gatherings, introduced her to individuals interested in her music, and encouraged her to explore opportunities that had previously seemed out of reach. His behavior reflected a deep transformation, a shift from impatience and oversight to genuine partnership and respect. She felt a growing sense of trust and security, knowing that he had begun to see her not as someone to manage, but as an equal, a talented and capable individual. The ripple effects extended beyond her immediate circle. People who had once underestimated her began to approach her with curiosity and admiration. Invitations to perform, collaborate, or share her story began to surface. She approached these opportunities with thoughtfulness, aware that her abilities were now recognized but also mindful of the care required to maintain her integrity and personal boundaries. Each step was measured, deliberate, and empowering. As the weeks passed, she discovered a renewed sense of purpose. The performance had ignited a spark that had long lain dormant, and she began to explore her musical abilities more fully. She practiced with dedication, revisiting old compositions, experimenting with new arrangements, and allowing her creativity to flourish in ways she had never imagined. The piano became both a sanctuary and a platform, a means of personal expression and a bridge to connect with others. Her personal growth was mirrored in her relationships. Her husband's support deepened, characterized by attentiveness, encouragement, and active engagement in her pursuits. Their interactions became more collaborative, respectful, and meaningful. Friends and acquaintances responded to her authenticity, and she found herself building connections grounded in mutual appreciation and shared experiences. The recognition of her talent had opened doors to new relationships, both personal and professional, that reinforced her sense of self-worth. She reflected on the journey that had led her to this point, understanding the significance of courage, resilience, and authenticity. The performance had been a catalyst, but the foundation had been built over years of quiet perseverance. She acknowledged the strength that had carried her through doubt, fear, and underestimation, and she recognized the value of her experiences in shaping the person she had become, as she continued to engage with her music and the opportunities that arose. She encountered moments of challenge and uncertainty. There were times when nerves, fatigue, or self-doubt threatened to undermine her confidence. Yet, she approached these moments with the same determination and awareness that had guided her through the performance. She reminded herself of her resilience, of the power of her talent, and of the validation she had received. Each challenge became an opportunity to reaffirm her abilities and her strength. The recognition of her talents also allowed her to inspire others. She shared her story with those who faced challenges, limitations, or self-doubt, offering encouragement and demonstrating the power of perseverance. Her journey became a source of hope, testament to the idea that obstacles need not define one's potential or diminish one's achievements. Through her example, she created a ripple effect of empowerment, touching lives beyond her immediate circle.